So we know social media has a lot of power when it comes to building our connections and communities. How does it go about doing that?
So in a lot of different ways, it's really good for starting relationships sometimes, right? Whether that's romantic or not. A lot of people make friends online, and particularly people who are more shy or socially anxious, they can find it easier to be themselves online, which means that they're more likely to develop friendships with other people like that online. And they often bring those friendships offline, and they are just as like deep and meaningful relationships as anyone who meets offline. So that's one way that people can connect. It helps us maintain our individual relationships, even if that's people that maybe we knew in the past, like at a job we worked at before, or at a previous school that we've kept in contact with. And through small interactions like liking a post that they shared or commenting on something, we can keep that relationship going even if we don't see them all that often. So it's quite useful for that. And then for our friendships, we might be using like direct messages to chat all the time, sharing images, tagging each other in images when we go out, those kinds of things. And so it's creating this like shared repository of memories and connection and building good connections. And then within communities, so there's some minority groups who form really strong communities online, like the LGBTQ plus community. They tend to be more online and form friendships online more, particularly if there aren't a lot of people in their area who are like them, or they're not aware of them because they might be there. It allows them to be themselves online, express themselves, learn from other people, see like what does a life look like if you come out? How can you come out to your family? What's the best way to do it? Who can you talk to then if something goes wrong? So there's a community of support there for people. Same with other minority groups, like autistic people and neurodivergent people often find really, really strong community online, whether that's in gaming or in different forums around interests that they have in common. So there's these really powerful ways that people can create connection. And there's so many ways people can get support. So if you're experiencing an illness, maybe an illness that you don't want to talk to your friends about, or you don't want to talk to openly about, or something that's quite rare, that there aren't other people around who might understand it, you can go to an online community where other people understand it really well and share your experiences. You can see what's helping other people. You can see what it looks like to maybe live with this, and the ways that you can actually have a really good life living with something like this. So it can be really, really positive. Now there can, of course, be negatives to it, but there's so many things that we don't think about. We tend to focus on the negatives of social media and not think about the ways that it can actually be really powerful. And then one more way that it's really useful is for activism, right? Creating communities of activism. I don't know that we would have heard of Greta Thunberg if it wasn't for the online environment. You know, she was a girl standing outside her school every Friday, but if we hadn't all shared it and connected, and if other kids hadn't started doing the same to build that movement, then we might not have even heard of her. And she's a very powerful voice for a lot of things now, not just about climate change.
That's actually so interesting, because a lot of the friends that I've made through like activism work and social justice work have been online, because I'll see in like their feed that, oh, they're also a part of the Shona project community, and then we meet up at an event and be like, I saw you online. And then it's like an automatic friendship. So that's really, really interesting.
It's lovely. And like the same thing happens to me with academics. We make friends online and we go to a conference. We're like, oh my God, hi, it's so nice to meet you in person. So you can build relationships really, really nicely, and quite meaningful ones, because you're connecting around stuff that you have in common, which is really nice.
So both Greta Thunberg and the Shona project community are very prominent online, and social media kind of helps that community and then Greta Thunberg to use their voice for a positive change, positive movement. How's social media a tool to help us do that?
Well, the first thing that it does is bring people together, right? It allows people a voice that they wouldn't necessarily have otherwise. It allows people to organize, to come together collectively, you know, using things as simple as hashtags to create a kind of a wave that kind of shows everybody what's important within a particular space. So when things go viral, in terms of a movement going viral, we've had loads of examples like the Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, etc. In Ireland, where that's been used, I think really, really well, is the repeal referendum, and before that, the marriage equality referendum, because they were the first two referenda in Ireland where social media played a huge part. And it allowed a lot of people to talk about their perspective on it and to share their stories. And I think stories are one of the most powerful things in creating change. So a really good example of that from those referenda, so from the marriage equality referendum, was like right at the end of the campaign, before people were voting, all of the Irish people, and particularly younger Irish people who were living in the UK and Europe and as far as Australia and America, decided that this was such an important issue that they didn't want to be the one vote that didn't get it through, and they all came home to vote. And there was the hashtag home to vote, and it was photographs of the ferries were all full, the planes were full, everybody had Irish flags, pride flags, like it was unbelievable. And I get goosebumps and I cry every single time I talk about it, because it was so emotional just seeing the support from all around the world of Irish people saying, this is hugely important, we need to make this change. So it really can make a difference bringing people together online.
And social media facilitated that and made that impact of that movement even bigger.
Absolutely.
So it's a very positive way. Shona Project actually did something very similar recently for the women's shutdown in South Africa. We supported them through social media and we got our junior ambassadors involved.
Amazing.
And it was just such a lovely way to support women who aren't in Ireland halfway across the world, and we could still support them through social media.
It's lovely.
When we're online dating, what kind of issues keep coming up, and like how can we protect ourselves from them?
So there's a few, right? Obviously you are attempting to meet somebody that you don't know, right? So that person, like we just talked about, can be not real, which is a problem. So you don't want to talk with somebody for too long before you meet them in person. And meeting in person, you have to be also really careful and look after your safety, because again, it's a person you don't know, right? And that first date isn't really a date. It's more like the final stage of the filtering process, where you make sure that they're not a serial killer, that they are who they say they are, and that there's maybe some chemistry. It can turn into a date if it's going well, but if you think about it as just like, I want to check that this person's okay, and so you protect yourself accordingly. You let people know where you're going, you go somewhere that's easy to leave, and so on. But also when we're online dating, you know, you're talking to somebody through mainly text, even if you move on to something like WhatsApp. And when we talk to people through text, we talked before about how we don't have all the nonverbal cues, the body language, all of that stuff. And so it's a bit easier to create a kind of a better version of yourself, right? So you've got more time to edit what you're sending to the person. And you also don't have to worry, like when we're face to face, you might be thinking about like, what's my body doing now? How am I sitting? How do I look? What are all these other people doing around? You're worrying about a lot of other things, and that takes up like cognitive space. When you're texting somebody, you don't have to worry about any of that, right? They can't see you, and you don't have to be concerned with what's going on around you. So you've got more attention to give to how you present yourself through text. So you're sending like a slightly more polished version of yourself, maybe a little bit wittier, a little bit more fun. And then the other person doesn't have much information about you, but they swiped right on you. So they liked your picture, which means that they're more likely to view everything after that a little bit more positively, right? So they're filling in the gaps in what they know about you, and they tend to fill it with positive information. So our brain likes to make meaning, and it like fills in the gaps. So if you talk to somebody for a few days or a week or two, that's kind of fine, right? Because you can't build such a complete picture of the person. But the longer you talk to them through text, the more you build a picture of them in your head. And because you're filling in all the gaps with positive information, it becomes really idealized, and it becomes this picture of somebody so perfect. And when you meet them in person, they can't possibly come up to that expectation, right? This fantasy that you have. And so that's a problem. But also what happens is you feel like they're so amazing and you have such a great connection with them. And when we're communicating through text, we've got something called hyper-personal communication. Essentially what it means is we feel more intimacy more quickly, heightened emotions, and we feel like we really know the person well. And what that can lead to, along with online disinhibition, where we might do things that we wouldn't ordinarily, is maybe like sending nudes, particularly if they ask, or if there's sexual exchanges at all, in a way that we wouldn't normally do with someone that we don't know, right? So that might lead to, when you come out of that space afterwards, you might go, what the hell did I do that for? Now this person, I don't even know who they are, I haven't met them yet, and they have these images and I don't know what they'll do with them. So that can lead to regret for some people, because you're sort of in this little bubble where you feel like you really know the person very well. So that can be problematic. With how we can protect ourselves, if you haven't met somebody, I wouldn't share images with them because you do not know who they are yet.
Yeah.
And even in person, initially when you meet somebody, you still don't really know who they are. You still have to be very, very careful because an awful lot of the images that end up online are from ex-partners.
Yeah.
You know, when people break up, sometimes the partner will put images online, which is illegal. Completely illegal. Even if they are not intending harm, it's still illegal. We have an amazing law in this country, which is Coco's Law. And by putting images online of somebody, even if you don't intend to create harm, that is actually illegal under Coco's Law.
Okay.
If you intend to create harm, that's also illegal, and it comes with a more severe prison sentence. So the recognition that it wasn't intended to cause harm is really, really important because sometimes people are just like, look at my amazing girlfriend. And that's also illegal, right? It's not great.
Yeah, and can I ask, is that law just for under 18s or is it over 18s too? Does it apply to everyone?
Everybody.
Okay.
Absolutely,
so
everybody.
that protection's in place for everybody.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. It's probably more severe for under 18s because obviously then you're sharing images of children, which is much more problematic.
Yeah. When we're talking about online dating, is there a difference between a girl's experience and a boy's experience when it comes to it?
Absolutely. There's a big difference between a lot of different groups' experiences, but the male-female divide is probably the strongest of all of them, and particularly for heterosexual boys and girls. So what tends to happen is girls join a dating app and they get lots of interest, right?
Yeah.
So they get a lot of messages, they get a lot of swipe rights, because guys tend to swipe right on like almost everybody. And then they filter later based on who responds. Whereas girls tend to be much pickier. Of course, this is on average, right? Some people differ. So girls get loads of responses and they get loads of first messages. Like one study found though that the first messages that guys send to girls were on average 12 characters long. So it's not 12 words, it's 12 characters.
Oh, okay.
So that's like, hey, what's up? That's it, right? So it doesn't
Very
tell you
dry.
anything. You don't know if the person read your profile. It doesn't tell you anything about them. It doesn't give you a lot to work with. So they're gonna pick the best messages to respond to, right? And the best profiles, the ones they like most. So for a lot of guys, they're swiping right in everybody. They're not getting a lot of matches because women are pickier. They're not getting a lot of responses to the first message they send because women are picking the best ones.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of choice, a lot of the time. And so for them, the experience can cause a lot of anxiety because basically they're putting themselves out there, but they're getting nothing back. And it feels like a void. And it feels like everyone hates me, no one wants to date me, and that can promote a lot of anxiety. It can sometimes turn into anger towards women if men have been on it long enough, and maybe if they're ghosted a lot, because people do ghost a lot on online dating. Like if you want to just stop a conversation, you just stop it and not come back. And that can be very frustrating. So a lot of guys have talked about things like, you know, if I don't have the perfect response, I know I'll be ghosted, so I just don't say anything at all. I'll ghost them first. So there's a lot of pressure to get things right and to be perfect and to be funny and to have the right thing to say. And so sometimes girls get a lot of abuse, right? A huge amount of abuse online. It's not always a fun experience. So they get a lot of contact after they've said they're not interested. And that might be a guy just trying to get any response back, right? But it can turn in, like on the other end of that, it can look like harassment. And sometimes it is harassment. They get sent dick pics and text messages that are sexually explicit when they have not asked for them. Sometimes it's the opening message, which is not a good strategy for any guys listening to this. And so that can feel humiliating or like devaluing, you know, is this all I'm here for? So girls get an awful lot more of that kind of stuff as well. Sometimes even like threats of harm and getting called names and things like that. Also, members of the LGBTQAI plus community get more of that. Any minority groups like people of color, people who are disabled, etc., can get a lot more of that kind of messaging as well. So for guys, it can be very frustrating because they're not getting anything. For women, it can be really frustrating and can cause fear sometimes because of the kind of stuff they're getting. And for everyone, it's just sometimes very frustrating because like when you meet somebody in person, they're not always who you think they were going to be. And not because they were necessarily lying, but just online dating profiles, it's just not a good way to get to know somebody, right? It's very shallow. And like my research for my PhD was looking at like, can we tell what somebody's like from their dating profile, from what they write about themselves? And it was no, we can't. So when someone shows up and we're like, oh, I pictured them differently, we have to remember sometimes and give people a little bit of grace that we pictured them because we imagined something, but we had very little information to go on. And so it's not that they were misrepresenting themselves a lot of the time, it's that we pictured something else, totally different.
And you know, I think when it comes to online dating on dating apps, I, in my opinion, believe it's a bit easier than using like Snapchat for dating. Because I know, like say amongst my friends or like people I've spoken to, online dating through Snapchat has like risen, but you don't know what they look like when you add them. You just see their Bitmoji and you start talking. Then they'd be like, oh, what you look like, you send a picture, and then if you're not interested, it's like you've already formed that connection. And now you get ghosted. So it's a bit harder, I think.
And you build a picture in your head and then the photograph doesn't necessarily agree with that. So you get that dissonance or that like conflict between the two ideas. I mean, they've even found in the research that if you're working with people and then you see a picture of them and it's not who you imagined, that you like them less socially. So it's kind of a problem to get pictures later. We like to have it, and particularly as women, we like to have a lot more information first for our own safety. And so, getting a picture later is kind of problematic. And then again, you still don't know that that photograph's real. So, it's kind of an issue. But at least with online dating, one of the reasons it's good is that everyone on there is supposed to at least be single. They're not all single, but like they're more likely to be than walking up to somebody in a bar. Or on Snapchat, you don't know if somebody's single or not. And then approaching someone starts with a swipe. Right, so you've got some indication they might be interested if you've both swiped right in each other. So there's these little things that make it easier to connect. And particularly again, for people who are shy or socially anxious, that can make it a bit easier. Because walking up in public to somebody and asking them out is really hard, and it surprises me that the way that we do this offline is that generally men are much more likely to ask women out than the opposite way around. And we replicate that online, even though it's so much easier for women to ask men out. And when women actually are the ones to ask a guy out and to kind of pick somebody they're interested in, go and talk to them, connect with them, and ask them out, they are much happier with their partner. So it works well for women to do that, to be more proactive.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to having that layer of protection in front of you and like an extra layer of confidence when approaching dating because it's behind the phone and that. Yeah, no, that's so interesting. Thank you so much for talking. And just before we finish, I really, really want to say thank you for this conversation. You delivered it in such a non-judgy way. And as a young woman, I feel like sometimes having this conversation can be so scary and I can feel that I'm going to be judged, but you delivered it in such a lovely way. So I just really want to say thank you for that.
Thank you. I think it's so important. Like the way the online environment works, it makes us much more susceptible to doing things that we wouldn't do offline. And to be aware of those is really helpful so that we're less likely to fall for them. But like things like sexting and things like online dating are very normal, right? That's part of healthy relationships. It's like the most mainstream way to meet now. And sexting can be a really good part of a normal relationship with somebody that you trust. It's just being really careful about doing it with somebody you don't know and where those images might go and what protections are in place if they do go somewhere. But I'm not one to blame people for the kinds of things they're doing. I think people should do things that make themselves happy.
And I think having this open and safe conversation helps people become more aware of the dangers and stay safe. So thank you so much.